Hello everyone, this is Daniel Lee, and we're here on another edition of the Melee Mailbag, where we take questions from Melee Science, YouTube comments, my Twitter, and Ask FM, and we scour to see what are the best questions that we want to answer here at Yahoo. Now, the very first question we get asked very frequently is, what is a super major? When we talk about super majors, what I really think of is, do these players really want to win this event, or is it just another event on the side? So for example, last year, and for the last couple of years in general, people will always say they want to win EVO. Mango will say, I want the three-peat, Armada wants to repeat as a champion. And typically with a super major, not only does it have a large level of prestige and history behind it, but we see a lot of people come to the event. Most of the top 6 members are there. We see a large percentage of also the top 100 members in attendance as well. I can safely say events like Genesis, the Big House, and EVO qualify as a super major. However, if it's a tournament that qualifies in many aspects but just doesn't have the prestige, you can generally call it a major. And a major, has a large amount of players, it has multi-region or even international level talent at the event. A large amount of the top players in the top 30, top 100 are there, and there's a decent sized prize pot as well. So events like UGC, Shine, Pound, Get On My Level, and even some of the CEO events, I would define as a major. Of course, there's large regionals, and these tend to focus on highlighting players from a subset of regions. So for example, when we run a really large Kings of Cali, if it doesn't have that international talent or a bunch of people traveling, it mostly highlights people from California. Maybe there's a few people from Arizona and a few people that come from out of region. I define those as really large regionals more than a major. Of course, there's big locals like Super Smash Sundays that brand themselves to be the local event, usually have a couple hundred people on a regular basis. And we have the regular locals that come through the week. They don't really have the prestige of the larger locals in the same area. They usually appear once a week, a good handful of the top players from the region, along with a decent sizable chunk of local attendance comes as well. So overall, that's how I define events from super major all the way down to the local tournament that you see every week. And now for the second question, who will be the next non-Big Six member to defeat Armada in a set? And that's a very interesting question because you have to take into account 2 factors. A, what is that player's skill level and likelihood to beat Armada's Peach and also Armada's Fox, just in case if Armada backpedals to pick the Fox if the Peach is not working out. And also, how often are Armada and that particular player going to meet in bracket? I really thought about it, and I'm gonna have to go with Ice, and here's why. I don't think Ice is the most likely to win a given set against Armada, but given that Ice and Armada both live in Europe, and they will face each other in a large amount of these events, I think Ice's frequency of meeting Armada in bracket greatly exceeds everybody else, and that's why I have to give him the nod. And of course, Ice has taken Armada to, some interesting sets in the past. He's taken games, and I think that he does have the skill set to take on the Fox and also potentially take the Peach on in a couple matches. And hey, maybe he runs into a really good day and maybe he ends up winning a set finally. And for the third question, I want to talk about game length. Should we stick to an 8-minute clock or trim down to a 6-minute or a 7-minute clock? After the last Smash Summit, a lot of the commentators really wondered, is the game clock appropriate for the game of Melee? And a lot of controversy came up, in particular for Mutaking versus Chudat, where they timed out each other. They really weren't interacting. And Scar really begged the question, why aren't we playing 6 minutes? The issue I have with lowering the time based on certain matchups is that you affect other matchups too. So for example, you have a slower paced matchup like Peach versus Samus. Now, unfortunately, when you play 4 stocks, it's a really slow matchup, even if both players are playing aggressively. When a Peach hits a Samus or a Samus hits a Peach, it's not typically a combo, and they send each other very far. And unfortunately, they both have very good recoveries, so it's a lot of you hit your opponent and then you wait for them to come back, and then you guys interact again. And there's a lot of mini pauses. But unfortunately, a 6-minute clock, even if both players are playing aggressively, may not be enough time for them to have a full 4-stock match. Furthermore, when the clock is lower, you begin to realize around the 2-minute mark, there could be an issue or a thought in the back of your mind of, hey, you know, the time is getting really low. Maybe I should stall the game out. I have a minor lead, I should play the clock. So some people argue that, well, if you lower the time, you're gonna have a lot more players playing to stall out the game because now that becomes something that's in play. I would love for TOs to experiment on this. I'm not fully, you know, on board with going to a 6-minute clock. I like the 8-minute clock personally just because of the slower matchups. But, you know, I am in favor of experimenting with a 7-minute clock. I don't think we lose too much, and I think that's a fair, healthy amount of time for those slower matchups to complete. So if you were to ask me for sure, 6, 7, or 8, why don't we try 7, but I'm okay with 8. So that wraps up the 3 questions for this edition of the Mailbag. However, in the future, if you want your question posted and answered here, go ahead and post in the YouTube comments, respond to my Twitter, or put a question in my Ask FM. We answer everywhere. Thank you for listening today.